Hi, I'm Dr. Julie and I'm in great company.
Hey guys, welcome back to Great Company Podcast. I hope you're having a great day. I'm really excited for today's episode because we have Dr. Julie coming on the show. Now, Dr. Julie is a clinical psychologist. She is huge on social media. She has written books. Her new book, which is coming out, which is called Open When, is all about mental health in different ways. So you open the book when you're feeling anxious, open the book when you're feeling depressed, all those different things. What Dr. Julie does in such a brilliant way is she gives sort of help and sort of understanding of mental health in the sort of social media digital world. She believes that everyone should have access to trained professionals, and she does it for everyone on social media. She is huge, she's incredible, she's wonderful, and one of the people I've been trying to get on for so long. So I'm really excited for this today. Now, if you haven't subscribed to our show already, please do. All you got to do is click this little button here that says subscribe, and it does us wonders. And hopefully the things that you can take away from this episode are going to be amazing. Okay, get ready for this. Enjoy this episode of Great Company with Dr. Julie.
Can I just say before we start, I am the biggest fan of yours.
Thank you.
I think what you do and how you help people is just incredible. I really, truly do. And I'm not just saying that to butter you up before we start, but it really is. You blew up massively on social media. I mean, I was looking again at your TikTok and your Instagram. I mean, the views that you get are crazy and people absolutely love it. And then you wrote your debut book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? Which, the biggest seller in that year, 2022.
Yeah. Which blew my mind because
It doesn't blow my mind. It's unbelievable.
I had that feeling.
I can see you slightly reserved as I said it.
Oh, it's still a cringe moment because when you write something and you put everything into something, I remember having that feeling of, I don't want it to do badly, but I also don't really want anyone to read it. And it's just that vulnerability, I guess, of kind of putting yourself out there again. Maybe it's the sort of the introvert side. And I had images in my mind of, can you remember the Alan Partridge episodes where he's trying to flog his book before they pulp it? And I was thinking, oh God, I'm going to be stood in the local shopping centre trying to flog books. And I'm really glad that didn't happen. But
do you know what it makes me? I can imagine so many people listening now. It's going to make them feel so much better that someone like yourself also has those fears and those imposter syndrome and everything flooding through.
Yeah, the idea that there are lots of skills you can learn and tools at your disposal that you can use to help get you through human moments, but it doesn't stop you from being human and having those human moments. So, and really, what happened with the first book was, yes, it was incredible, the people that got in touch and said, it's helped me with this, it's helped me with that. And I had some lovely stories of people who were carrying the book around with them to help them through really difficult moments. And that was kind of given to me as a compliment. And all I could think of was, I didn't really write it for those moments. It was more of a set of, things that people learn to help you get through later on when things get bad. But if you're in the thick of it and you're trying to work out which way is up, you don't want me to come along and say, if you'd have just learned mindfulness 6 months ago, you'd be all right now. You don't need that, do you? You need, when you're in the moment, you need someone to grab you by the shoulders, look you in the eye and say, I know a way through. Follow me, right? This is, here we are. This is what you need to focus on. And here's the next step you need to take to get through this moment.
I remember, again, I spoke about this before, but I was really struggling with anxiety, terrible. And I struggled with anxiety throughout my 20s. I joined a television show. It was a reality show. I didn't really understand what was going on. Life was all over the place. I drank a lot to cover up any emotion. And I got myself into a really sort of sticky situation where, to the point where I had depersonalization. Like, it was not great. And I said nothing to anybody. Nothing.
Nobody.
Didn't tell my mum. Didn't tell. I always used to say that I feel, do you ever feel nervous? Do you ever feel like you're scared? That's how I'd say, and then we go, no, I don't feel scared. You don't ever feel like you're scared? Because I was trying to understand what anxiety was. and every single time I talk about it, I even get emotional. It's so strange. But my great friend Toby, who was best man at my wedding, I decided to tell him, and I phoned him up. And I remember I was pacing up and down the street, and I was thinking, okay, I'm going to tell him. So I phoned him up and I said, hey, I call him Bubble. Hey, Bubble. He goes, hey, you okay? And I go, well, not really. And I sort of broke down. And he went, what's the matter? And I went, I don't know, but something's wrong with me. And he went, don't worry, we'll go through it together. And it was this insane echo back.
Yeah.
That was all I was desperate for.
Yeah.
For someone to throw a tennis ball and it would bounce back towards me and I'd get something back. And my biggest upset is when you realize that people don't reach out. That connection is lost because you're either scared or you're nervous, or you don't have anyone, or you're stuck in a situation where you can't. And it's so upsetting that actually that human connection and talking about it and releasing your emotions is so important.
Yeah. And that person doesn't even need to have the skills to solve it for you.
Yeah.
That's the interesting part, isn't it? That just knowing that someone is going to walk alongside you through it is everything. You know, in therapy, I don't fix anyone. They do that work themselves. I'm just willing to hold that space for them and guide them as they move through it. And, you know, that's our social side, isn't it? We just need each other. But we find such strength in that. So, that's what this is really about, was just, you know, offering some words to people when they're in that moment.
You and we're going to go into the book and your chapters, which I can't wait. But you talk about these amazing things, right? Which where you almost say you lean into things. So people talk about affirmations or always talking positively about yourself. And your argument is, yes, that's a good thing, but not all the time.
I think I advocate for honesty, but respectful honesty. So, you know, I'll often talk to people in sessions about, you know, people will just hold on to that self-critical side. So, you know, they think that being really hard on themselves has given them all their drive and all their achievements and all their productivity. And so if they're nice to themselves, that will somehow kind of zap all their drive for life, and they'll just become nothing and they'll have no drive to do anything. So they hold on to that idea that they need to be really hard on themselves. Whereas if you're respectful of yourself and you talk to yourself in a way that is honest, so there's this kind of difference between being really hard on yourself and being indulgent and saying, well, you know, you're fine, you're absolutely fine as you are. Actually, we don't trust the friends in our lives that are like that. We trust the people who say, yeah, do you know what? This isn't the best thing for you, or here's what you should be doing. You messed up there, but we're going to go through it together. So there's something about honesty that comes with respect at the same time. So it's not the person who hammers you into the ground for making a mistake, but it's also not the person who denies the fact that you've made one. It's the person who says, okay, here we are. This hasn't gone as you predicted. You didn't anticipate this, but let's make it better. Here's where we focus next.
So, Alex, so you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
Do you do that with your kids? Do you say when they've done something wrong or they need to change it, you say, hey, this is probably not right, but, you know, we can change it and make it better by doing this way?
Yeah. I think I try to do that with myself first.
Great.
And so that then... And I just never claim to be the perfect parent at all. There are moments where, you know, if they've done something wrong, that I'm not going, okay, here's my therapeutic approach. Being realistic about it. But I think it's a general feel for things that it gets me. If I hear any of my kids speaking about themselves in a way that's sort of full of contempt or, you know, vicious, you know, that sort of, heard my 12-year-old girl mention for the first time I'd ever heard it, where she expressed discomfort or dissatisfaction with her appearance. Oh, as a mother, that just got me. And it's a natural part of growing up, right?
Totally.
It's normal to have that. But my urge was to jump in and be like, no, no, you are perfect as you are. But there's a sort of, one of the sort of therapeutic techniques we use in the room with someone is guided discovery. So you're never sat there trying to convince, you know, if you came into the room.
So let's try that. If we're going to do this with each other, if you're going to play it towards me, how would that work?
Yeah. So if you came into the room and said, you know, I hate myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit there and say, here's half a dozen reasons why you shouldn't. I'm going to talk you through, or you're going to do the talking, but I'm going to just guide that conversation to allow you to explore that either way and whether it's warranted. I want you to discover that that's not warranted, right? If I tell you that, you shouldn't think that, that's not going to help you. And you're not going to suddenly not think it just because I told you not to. You need to discover that for yourself and come to your own conclusions about that.
That is so interesting. But so that instant validation. So I say, I feel, I don't think I look good at the moment. And you say, no, you look great because of this and this.
Yeah.
That will validate me for a bit, but I won't actually believe it after a while. That will just go in a second. So that self-discovery you have to do yourself. It's like, It's like me giving the answer to a maths exam, but not understanding how the equation works.
Yeah, exactly. It won't stick unless you kind of have come to that rationale yourself
Wow, I didn't even think of that. That's so interesting, because I think we seek validation all the time, but actually it needs to come from, there's always this sort of hypotheses where it's like, you got to heal the inside out, right? But if you're just being validated all the time, you're great, you're fine, that's not actually healing it.
Yeah. And it's a bit like the value of sport for kids, right? If you could tell your child that, you're a winner and it's okay to lose, but until they've had experiences of winning and losing and getting through it, they're never really prepared for that. So that's where things like sport and stuff are great, because you get to kind of, it's only through action. Your brain learns through evidence. So action is your kind of, super, what's the word? Kind of secret weapon, really. That
it's your superpower.
is good. Yeah, your superpower, that's the word I'm looking for. That's going to kind of enable you to really discover things for yourself and then hold on to it.
Okay, so if we are in a relationship, which lots of people listening probably are, and they're struggling to communicate with their partner, or their partner is not really understanding what their partner is trying to tell them, how do you fix that? How do you make sure that communication works? Because I always believe that relationships, unless there's cheating or whatever go on, but relationships break down because the communication is right. One side is not understanding the other. Yeah. So how do you sort that?
I think something that probably goes wrong is when people avoid the difficult conversations. That if we know something's going to bring up emotion, or it's going to be a little bit testy or heated, then we avoid it and we cover it over. And those sorts of things, that tendency to do that is a bit like trying to hold air underwater. Like it will always find its way to the surface, but when you least expect it. So as if you're often do this exercise in therapy actually with people where we can probably do it with the book actually. Mm-hmm. So if you put your hand on the other side and just push against me. So if you imagine that
feels great. Feels very balanced.
Nice little stretch.
Yeah, I know.
If you imagine that is a kind of a bunch of feelings or issues that you don't really want to deal with, it's uncomfortable. And so you don't, right? You just hold it at arm's length. You can carry on with the rest of your day and you're pushing it away.
So we're holding, so for people listening, you're pushing one side of the book, I'm pushing the other side of the book, and we have the book.
Yeah, I'm all the shit you don't want to have. I'm all the thoughts and the feelings or the difficulties in your relationship that you don't really want to deal with.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be in your head. And so you have to keep pushing back to keep me at bay.
Correct.
So now if we said, okay, end of this, go about the rest of your day, and I'm just going to be doing this all day. And it would be difficult to kind of focus on stuff, but also when you get tired or you let your guard down, this is going to come flying over and hit you in the face. So that's when all the difficult emotions suddenly hit us and we feel absolutely overwhelmed because we've been holding it back for so long, and then something's happened, we've let our guard down, and it's just like opened the floodgates, right? So now if we take that, and this time if you just hold your hand out, and it's the same stuff you don't want to have, same uncomfortable stuff, but I'm just going to hold it there for you. You're just going to just carry it with you. Mm-hmm. So if now we said, okay, end of the session, you go about the rest of your day, but you just keep that with you, that would feel fundamentally different, right?
Feels different, yeah.
So you would be more able to engage in conversation, do your work, your arm's going to be less tired.
Yeah.
And you still get to choose to look down. It's still there, but you get to choose when you consider it and when you think about it and when you work on it. But you're also free to do all the other stuff. Whereas, it's not waiting to hit you in the face as soon as you let your guard down. So it's that kind of difference of, if you're not pushing stuff away, if you're willing to hold it, it doesn't fight against you so much.
But Julie, some people find it so tricky to have those conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so hard, right? Because it's like, I don't think I can talk about it. I don't think I can say it. Someone once told me the best way to have a conversation with your partner is to lie on a bed and look at the ceiling so you don't face each other.
Yeah, or go for a walk, that kind of thing when you're not... Sometimes that can help if the intimacy side of it is tricky or kind of overwhelming. That can be really helpful. But also, it's really helpful to go into it knowing what your goal is. And by that, I mean, often disruptions in relationships they give you the sense that you want to win. You just want them to understand your point of view, and then it will all be all right. And they feel exactly the same way. And so if the aim is to win, the relationship loses, because the only person that feels good in victory and looks good in victory, or feels that they look good in victory, is you. So if you win the argument, you feel fantastic. And actually the person you're trying to have a relationship with feels crushed. And that does nothing for your relationship. What they get is a sense of how he was willing to completely annihilate my self-esteem in order to feel like he was right. Or, he was willing to really break my heart in order to win this argument. And that stays, and that kind of chips away at trust and the ability to connect in the future. So when we sort of enter into those difficult conversations or arguments with the set idea that, okay, I married this person, I want to have a really good relationship, improving relationship with them in the years ahead. Actually, our goal here is resolution and finding a compromise. And that's going to be really difficult because I'm really angry at this person and they've done this and they've done that. But let's, and also kind of seeing it as it's you two against the problem rather than you against them. It changes the dynamic of how you're going to approach the problem.
Judy, you've just changed my whole perception. I'm going to be honest, I had an argument with my wife today.
Yeah.
I had a big argument. It wasn't my fault. We woke up this morning, we were renovating a house. We had to go, God, the first world problems. We had to go and look at some marble. I'm just being, we had to go look. And she was very stressed, and it wasn't my fault, right? It actually generally wasn't my fault. And so I wanted to try and prove to her that it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
So she got cross at me. Hang on, she's getting cross. This is unfair. This is not my fault. I need to win this argument to prove to her that this isn't my fault. And you're right. And I do. I win the argument because it's not my fault. And what I get from her is an apology and, oh, I'm sorry. That it makes me feel a bit better because I've won, but actually you're so right. What is the issue here surrounding it? What is the resolution? We're married, it's okay.
Yeah.
She's obviously struggling with something there. Me wanting to win the argument because I feel like that's the total wrong attitude to have. And
yet it's so natural, such a natural response to feeling like you're being attacked, is the defenses go up, right? And that's where, when we have an issue with the other person, going in with the criticism or the attack, or, if any of that is laced with contempt, like you always do this or you never do that, then the other person immediately, the emotional shutters come down because you're being personally, your character is being attacked. And so you're just in defense mode because it triggers shame. And when you feel shame, you are just defending yourself. You are just protecting yourself. You can't really do anything else. It's on impulse. So that's when you then you go back and bite back, and then they bite back. And so it is natural, but sometimes just having that awareness of, what's my goal here? I want to spend my life with this person. Let me take 2 minutes out of the room to just recalibrate and think about that. And then I can come back in with something a bit different.
Why, as humans, do we have that sort of innate ability to avoid fault? We never want it to be, it's within us, right? We want to blame others because if we blame ourselves, that's wrong. So we try and find blame wherever we can. Why do we do that?
Because it's painful, isn't it? No one ever wants to feel that, it's so psychologically threatening to feel like you might not be enough. And, it's really painful. And when you then, that triggers shame, there's no learning to be had in shame. It's just threatening. It's just protect. Just shut down, withdraw, and all of that leads to kind of negative outcomes. So we try to defend ourselves, and we try to, convince the people. That's natural, right? Convince the people in your life you're okay, you're enough, and in the same respect, we're trying to convince ourselves of that too, that we're enough. Because if you don't believe that, you're going to be in turmoil, absolute turmoil.
So with your partner, with your husband, when you have an argument...
I'm always right.
There we go.
Different for us.
Do you think he's listening now and he's like, hang on a second.
You never do that.
You never admit. I mean, what I'm saying is, do you practice what you preach or try to?
Try to, but also I never want to give the impression to people that because I've read the books and know the stuff, that makes it easy to do, or that makes you sort of somehow more than human. So part of this is you learn how to deal with relationships early in life based upon the people you're in relationships with as a child, and that becomes your template that you then take into adulthood. And so when something happens that feels familiar in your mind, so your brain is constantly taking information in from the outside world, but it's not only taking that information, it's trying to make meaning out of it. And so to do that, it will take memories from the past experiences when you have felt similar. And
give me an example.
So let's say as a child, you were always criticized for sort of academic imperfections or something like that.
All right.
And then as an adult, you're sat there with your wife and you're doing your accounts or something, and you make a mistake and she mocks you for doing it. Then it will trigger that really painful feelings that you had as a child of kind of just never being good enough. And so your reaction, even though it might have been a little, she probably thought this is just a bit of banter, he might even laugh at the reaction. It might trigger such an emotional response because your brain has made meaning that perhaps isn't in this situation, but it feels like something that happened back then. So you'll have this big emotional reaction and she'll go, what happened there? What, why did that, push a button? She didn't see it coming because your brain is making meaning of it based on past experiences that you've had that felt similar.
Wow. So that child within us, that inner child doesn't go. It's hard to heal that inner child in some ways.
So you've got a series of kind of templates so all your experiences as a child, you're absorbing all that and you're learning, okay, when this happens, do that, and that leads to that outcome. Or, you're learning how to survive relationships as a child who has no control over them, but desperately needs them to survive. So you develop kind of survival strategies in complex and difficult relationships as a child. And then those templates carry on into adulthood. But they're less helpful often in adulthood because the relationships are different. You're not child to adult, you're adult to adult, and you have responsibilities and you've got to compromise and those sorts of things. So then they become disruptive, and then we have to you can't necessarily unlearn or remove those templates that you have. You can become aware of what they are, become aware of when they're detrimental, and then make adjustments. You can keep learning so you can develop new patterns with your partner and they can override the old ones.
If someone's listening now, right, and they're recognizing that perhaps they're being triggered, or they're having conversations with their partner or their friends and they bring up emotions and they're listening, they suddenly go, wow, I'm making the connection from when I was a child to now, and maybe it's bringing up those emotions. How do we stop the cycle? What tips would you give to someone listening who is in that sort of cycle and can't get out of it?
So it happens really gradually. So what happens in therapy is people will come along and talk about the things that have been happening, and you literally map it out on paper. So okay, this happened, then you felt this. And so because of that feeling, you did that to cope with the feeling, and it made the feeling go away, but then the feeling came back. So you did that thing again and you went around the cycle again. So you kind of map out these cycles that you get stuck in. And what you find is week after week, the details of the cycle change, but the cycle is the same generally. And what you're doing over those weeks is you're building up this familiarity with the cycles you get stuck in. When you think, I do this same thing over and over again, and I don't know why, I just find myself doing the same thing. And when you kind of look into it in therapy like that, you start to notice it in the moment. So in therapy, you're doing it in hindsight, you're looking back at the week gone by. But then when you're in it in real life, you start to go, oh, I know where I am on the cycle. We've done this 10 times, I know. And then what you get is this moment of opportunity to either go around the same cycle again or do something different, because you would have talked about what the exit is and where you break it. Sometimes you'll go around the same old cycle again,
but that bit's
and sometimes
hard.
you won't. Yeah.
That bit is hard to take that different direction.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy, because what you're used to, the familiar, that cycle, that's easier to stay in that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you go with the familiar rather than something new or different that feels unpredictable, even if the familiar is destructive. It's a coping strategy that probably worked back then. So something you did as a child, you know, if someone who has an avoidant kind of style, you know, avoidant attachment style. So if you're an avoidant attachment style, you maybe struggle with intimacy, or you pull back and withdraw from people. And it might be that in your childhood, you didn't have like physical affection, or your caregivers were unpredictable. And so actually it felt unsafe to be very close to them. And so it felt safer to be, you know, to pull back. And then in adulthood, that might be kind of difficult for your relationships. So, you know, if you've got that sort of avoidant strategy that came from childhood, in adulthood, it might not work. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense.
I don't think I answered your question.
No,
I
you
kind
did.
of forgot what your question was.
No, you answered that perfectly. That's exactly what we're saying. So, okay, so going into that sort of relationships as well, right? If you're in a relationship and you're going around in the same cycle where you're either constantly meeting people and it doesn't feel right, and you're breaking up with them, and you're just going, I just don't feel like I'm lucky in love.
Yeah.
Is that the wrong partnership, or is perhaps something with you in relationships that is making these relationships not work because you're doing the same thing, you're stuck in the same cycle?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's one thing to just think, well, you know, I've had bad luck, and, you know, men are whatever.
Bastards.
And you can say it.
You can
I was
say
a good girl. And therefore, you know, and then feel a victim of it. But it's really, really interesting the progress you can make when you're brave enough to look at your part in that cycle. So, you know, are you accepting certain types of behavior from the beginning that if you can pull back, you might be able to protect yourself in the future? And are you, you know, not connecting with certain people that would be more healthy for you to get in a relationship with? Because you're following that pattern of, you know, you seek relationships that feel familiar, not that feel healthy.
I had Alain de Botton on the podcast, and he said we look for familiarity rather than happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. Because anything that's unpredictable or novel is stressful, and you know, and dangerous potentially. It's a threat. So yeah, even if you've had a kind of, you know, destructive relationships, you will have that natural inclination to go for something that feels similar, not on a conscious level. And that's the thing. It's not about fault, or, you know, you're in this place because it's your fault. That's not true at all. It's how we're set up to, you know, you get your templates early in life for what to expect from other people. And then why would you know any different? You know, why would you have a template for what a healthy relationship is if you haven't had one yet? So, you know, often that's then about sort of working on creating, you know, this idea of what a healthy relationship would look like, or one that felt safe, and then working towards it.
If someone has been in a relationship and they're that type of person who fears abandonment and worry about people leaving, and then suddenly that person leaves and they can't deal with the heartbreak, because I know so many people listening are dealing with heartbreak or have dealt with it and not over. How do you get through that?
It's a grieving process. I think people talk about grief when someone dies, but you also grieve lots of different endings you can grieve. So there's that kind of process of, you know, yearning for someone. So you might, you know, you'll miss them. And it's really key to remember that missing someone doesn't mean that relationship was right for you. You can miss someone for all the good parts of it and still recognize that it wasn't for you. And like we were saying about even you know, your sort of early adulthood, there might be parts of that now you're, you know, a responsible adult with, you know, wife and kids and a job and everything, that you might miss some of that, some aspects of that, the freedoms or the fun, that kind of thing. But it doesn't mean you want it back. So it's really important to kind of distinguish that it's okay to yearn for something without stepping back into something that wasn't for you. But also to kind of shift expectations that that you should be over it by now. Like if you feel something, go ahead and feel it. It's all right. You just
I
allow
love
that to
that.
be. It's natural.
It's okay to feel the way you're feeling.
Yeah, whatever it is.
If you're still missing someone, that's all right.
Yeah.
Because that can happen with friends as well, where when you fall out with a friend, that's almost sometimes worse than a breakup, especially if they've been a friend for a long time.
Yeah. I think it comes with a lot of guilt, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Because we grew up with that kind of idea that, friends are forever and that kind of thing. And these sort of Hollywood has a lot to answer for with these kind of stories of like, friendships that just endure for life. And those do exist, but there are also other friendships that come and go, and that's okay too. Or there are times when you realize as you get older, maybe your values change or their values change and it no longer fits. And it's okay to call it a day if a friendship is unhealthy for you, or if someone is causing you harm in that friendship, if it's not working for you, it's okay to pull back from it.
That brings me on to your post that you did, which is 3 signs your friends are not really your friends. What are those 3 signs?
Oh God, that's a question, isn't it? Can I
posted-
remember what the video was?
You posted it.
I guess there are lots of signs that a friend might not have your best interests at heart. And the general idea is that you sometimes notice the signs they're so subtle that it's difficult to distinguish. There's not a clear kind of like, burr, burr, this friend is rubbish now. It's a sort of, that felt a bit odd. Or you walk away thinking, do they really like me? Or are they going to be talking about me now? Or, you get excluded from a couple of things and, okay. So it's always really subtle stuff. And you start to question yourself and doubt yourself about whether you did something that the others were judging, or whether you sharing that personal victory was too braggy because the response was cold, or these kind of things. So you start to really question yourself. And I think that's a key thing, is if you're unable to share good or bad news because of the reaction. So let's say you try to share something, you're struggling and there's some, something's happened in your life that's difficult. And really what you're seeking is some connection and support. And instead it gets slammed down with, worse has happened to me. And so your bid for connection is squashed. Or maybe you're sharing good news and something really great's happened to you. And, I started this podcast, it's done really well. And then what you find is, it gets shut down, or they don't want to talk about it, or you get a sort of compliment that feels like it's laced with insult or contempt, and you come away just feeling terrible. Then I think they're just indications. They're not indications necessarily that you should just end the friendship, but they're indications that maybe that person's struggling with this thing, or if it happens over a long period of time, maybe they're struggling with me. Maybe we don't have the connection that we did before, or maybe they don't have my best interests at heart.
That's a really tough thing to work out. And also, when we're taught about breakups with individuals, right, with partners, with love interests, but when it comes to friendships, no one teaches you how to break up with a friend. So how do you break up with a friend?
Well, I guess it depends on the friend, doesn't it, and the situation, and the connection that you have. Some endings will be big and emotional and have that big conversation, and others will be, friends that you've had because you were in the same places at the same times, and so it's able to just kind of, you're able to just part ways without a big confronting conversation about what's gone wrong. I think it depends on the situation with that.
If someone listening to this right now is maybe their son or their daughter or their friend or their husband or wife or cousin is acting distant, maybe they're anxious, maybe you think they're depressed, what kind of signs could you look out for?
So if someone else is kind of struggling, or if their mental health's deteriorating, I think if you know someone well, you'll notice certain changes. So, it might be that they stop coming out to see you. So maybe you have a social thing and they start avoiding it, or they start pulling out last minute, or they, stop calling and they used to call, or there'll be certain changes. If you know someone really well, the changes can be quite subtle, but you'll pick up on it more if you know them more, if that makes sense. So it's easier with closer friends, isn't it? But the exact changes differ between individuals and dependent on what's going on with them. So something like them not turning up to socials might be because they're struggling with anxiety, or maybe they're really low and so they're not feeling able to kind of socialize and things. And in some ways, I think it's just checking in, isn't it? It's just sometimes you'll notice something and it'll be nothing, or it won't be a big deal. But the fact that you checked in is everything. You just said, okay, you didn't come to the last couple of socials. Just wanted to see if you're all right, and that means everything to someone, whether they were struggling or not. So, but often I think we're so worried about saying the wrong thing that we don't say anything at all. And so kind of leaning into that awkward moment of, we might end up having a really emotional conversation here. Am I braced for it? It's so valuable if you can be brave enough to start that conversation.
And if you're in that thick of it, if you're in that dark cloud moment, you're feeling anxious or depressed, my big thing is that you can get through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's what I want people to know, is that you really can get through it, can't you?
Yeah. In my work over the year, when I was in the NHS, actually, I worked in sort of acute services where people were really, really poorly. And I've honestly worked with people who you wouldn't believe, if their lives were a movie, you wouldn't believe it could be true.
Really?
And they're in such a terrible place that you can't imagine they're going to get through it. And then you work and you work and you work, and it starts to change and things start to get better. And so I've seen people go from ultimate darkness to building a life for themselves. And so I know that it's possible. Convincing other people of that is difficult, because when you're in it, you can't see that, right? And so sometimes the work is just about kind of almost a bit of a lighthouse thing, where you're just casting a light to, okay, I can't get in there and drag you out of the ocean, but I can just show you where the shore is, and I can show you that it's there.
I love that.
But you got to swim.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because it's important, right? Because I think I always say that when you're feeling very blue or you're feeling very anxious, very down, it's a grey sky, but there's blue sky above the grey clouds. You just have to find a way of getting back to the blue sky. Yeah.
And you have to trust that it's there even when you can't see it. And that reminds me of something conversations I used to have with people, that even when people are in really dark places and they can't see, they don't feel hopeful about a good outcome, I sort of ask people to trust me to hold that hope for them, that I've seen people come through it. And so when you're feeling like it can't happen, just trust me that I can hold that hope for you until you can start to see it yourself. Because it is hard when you're in the moment. You can't be convinced that it's all going to be okay when you're in it, because it feels awful.
One of your chapters in your book, which is amazing, I'm going to get it exactly right, is when you want to be less awkward around people.
Yes.
Social anxiety is such a huge thing at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fault of social media, because we spend more time on social media and less time interacting with each other.
Yeah.
How do we accept social anxiety? How do we feel less awkward around people?
I think, to begin with, in order to build your kind of social confidence, you have to be willing to have the awkward moments. So if you think, well, I'm not going to be sociable and interact with people until I feel confident, you will just never get there. So, the most confident people, it's not like they've worked out how to avoid awkward moments. It's that they kind of don't focus on it, that they're not just focused on not having those moments. It's that they're focused on, I'm going to get to know this person, and I'm going to find out how they are, and I'm going to build a connection with them. And if there are sort of awkward moments along the way, I know I can get over those. That's fine. We'll just leap over it and move on to the next bit. And so if you're really, sometimes if you're so focused on the thing you're trying to avoid, you end up creating it if you're going into a social situation or just trying not to be awkward, then you end up feeling exactly that. So I think, some of it is, but also when it's something like a fear, like social anxiety, the way that we work on that is not sort of flooding you with the scariest thing to begin with. You literally create a list of situations that feel anxiety provoking, and in order of how intensely scary they are. The worst thing at the top might be, I don't know, going to a wedding or something, and then the thing right at the bottom might be, chatting to the person in your local convenience store. You start with that.
And you expose yourself to it bit by bit.
Yeah. So you do that. You have, a slightly challenging but achievable experience. You reflect on that, learn from it. You gain this kind of dopamine hit, or a little bit of momentum, a little bit of drive to go and do the next thing. And then once you do that, you get another little achievement, and then you do. So it's very gradual, step by step. But what you find is when you create that list, you never really have to do the scariest things, because as you move your way up the list, you're building this confidence in yourself that for good or bad, whatever happens, you can survive it. And so you build this sort of confidence then that makes those ones at the top of the list kind of fall away.
What I'm really taking from this conversation is that you can change your makeup. That's the most important thing. That if you feel like, oh, I'm just socially anxious, oh, I'm just anxious, oh, I'm just depressed, no, you can change that.
Yeah.
You can improve those things.
Yeah, and it's not like you kind of eradicate that experience, you add to it.
Sure.
Because that's so valuable, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you are, the life and soul of the party, but you know what it's like not to feel that. You know what it's like to feel terrified walking into a room. That's going to make you such a nicer person to the people who feel terrified walking into the room, isn't it? And because you know what it's like to be them. And so, you're much more likely then to use your new skills to make people feel welcome and develop really nice connections with them and stuff like that. So.
What I really love is that you're not, and God dare I say this, because unfortunately I have done that. You're writing books because you want them to make a difference. You want them to help. You're doing it for a real purpose.
Yeah.
And your new book, Open When, is so great. Because when you do, you have those moments, and especially when you're in the thick of it, when that dark cloud is on your head and you don't know which way to go, you can open up your book and you can look at the chapters and you can find the thing that relates to you. When your friends are not your friends, when you want to be less awkward, you can find these little chapters and you can turn to it and get help. Yeah. When you compare yourself and come up short, it's the first one. Yeah. Why did you pick that as the first chapter? And secondly, how do we stop comparing ourselves to everyone else? You don't. And don't tell me that.
But the thing is, it's, again, comparison is natural and inbuilt in you. You're a social being. It's important to know, if you live in a community, it's important to know whether you're measuring up and whether you're doing the right thing in that community by the other people. Mm-hmm. And so comparison can be really, really useful if we're doing it right. But what happens is we make the wrong comparisons that then lead us to just turmoil. And that's the way of working out whether the comparisons you're making are useful to you or not. It's how you feel afterwards.
So explain that to me.
So if you're sat on socials and you're looking at some, I don't know, movie star and comparing yourself to them, someone who's completely different to you, someone you have no idea what their real life is like or how awful it might be behind the scenes. You're comparing your life where you're in full view of all the, worst bits of it, and you're comparing that to the best bits of someone across the world. You're probably going to feel like shit after that, and you're going to feel terrible. And that's a sign that, not that your life is awful and you're worthless. It's a sign that you made a bad comparison that doesn't really help you. But let's say you're trying to master podcasts and interviews and you want to get better at a certain thing, and doing something in a certain way would really help, be a really helpful comparison to find someone you knew that had a kind of it was along the similar lines, in a similar sort of journey, but they liked to do something in interviews that you thought, oh, that's brilliant. I want to learn that. It's very specific. It's based on your goals and you improving yourself. And so you can make a comparison about, I do it this way, but I like how they do it. So how can I learn from that? So that envy becomes inspiration, and it can be constructive because it leads to action. Yeah. So you gain from that.
That is so good.
Yeah. You gain from that experience rather than just, feeling terrible.
Because we all feel envious.
Yeah.
Of course we do. But you change that into make it inspirational and you use it for your own tool.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can have that feeling. You can decide whether, okay, if I go down this route, that's not really helpful to me. But if I go down this route, that's helpful to me.
Social media allows us to pretty much Google anything.
Yeah.
Diagnosis, whatever. How dangerous is that on TikTok, where you can just basically self-diagnose yourself all the time?
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, it's been helpful that people have been able to start conversations that they would never have dared to have in person. And so they've become aware enough that they then go and see a doctor. Or, I get lots of messages where people say, oh, I saw your video. And so I started therapy. I'm 6 weeks in and it's helping so much. Thanks. And that's when you think, yes. Perhaps the other stuff where there's people online that don't have any kind of training or real education in mental health, but they're kind of giving an opinion, and then someone else across the world is looking at that and seeing it as if it has kind of authority or, is a fact, then that can lead to all kinds of problems, I guess, for those people. But that's what you have, right? If you have an open marketplace, it's similar to real life though, isn't it? Right. So if you're struggling, you get the choice whether you if you come see like a trained psychologist, or you could go and get a tarot reading, or you could go and get some Reiki, or you could go and get hypnotized. So you have choices. And I guess that's a reflection of the fact that social media is this kind of free marketplace where all sorts of people are allowed to be on there. I think that's where we have to kind of teach people and arm them up to the hilt with that kind of critical thinking, where you don't take everything you see as fact. You question everything, even the stuff from trained people, right? Or scientists, like, being able to question what you're hearing and get a second opinion and a third opinion and do that's just, I just think it's one of the most important skills we're going to have going forward.
If someone's going to read one chapter from the book, which one would you tell them to pick?
Whatever they're going through at that moment. I think that's the idea of it, isn't it? That you, whatever feels relevant to you, it just gives you that insight into, what a psychologist might say, or a few things to consider. And often it's about channeling the focus of your attention so that you know the way forward.
What have you learnt about when writing the book yourself?
Well, do you know what? I had like a health scare through the summer where I was diagnosed with cancer, and at that point I was a couple of weeks away from handing in the book, and I was reading through the chapters and kind of editing and stuff. And a couple of days after, I was so determined to get this book in and just get it out of the way so I could deal with this situation. And I just happened to be reading through the chapter on fear, and now I'm in fear. I'm looking at it thinking, well, no, this is not what I need to hear right now. So I deleted the whole thing and wrote it for me. So yeah, and in that sense, I realized in that moment of just terrible fear for my life, I needed a really hard line. This is what you need to focus on. We have to get through this, and we have to get our children through it, and there's no messing around here. So the chapter on fear is actually probably a bit different to how other people might approach it. It's quite hard line, it's stuff in there about, not being the prey, being the predator.
Wow.
Step forward, get on your front foot, this is what you need to focus. Fear is here, and actually it's going to help you because you increase your level of alertness so that you're ready to bring your A game, and now you have to do it. So here we go. Here's what you focus on, the next step, da, 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 da. So it's quite, the letter, and I did use it actually, and it helped me. So some people need a more kind of genteel approach, but in that kind of situation, I knew I needed to just bring my A game and focus and do the things, be in action. In forward motion in order to feel less like a rabbit in headlights and more like I was taking control of the situation.
I hope you don't mind if because it's breast cancer.
Yeah.
How's the diagnosis now?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine now. I'm out the other side, which is incredible, right?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's I'm super, super lucky that it was the earliest possible stage you could have found it, and I'm really lucky that I didn't have to do all the kind of radiation and stuff that makes you really poorly. So, I'm just, touch wood, feeling super, super lucky and grateful. And it's weird because you have in that moment when you find out, there is that natural inclination to go, why me? I've always tried to be healthy. And then at the other end, when you realize you're on the other side of it, you have another bit of a why me, where almost like a survivor guilt type thing, where you think, well, why did I have such an easy ride of it? I'm out the other side already. And there are people, fighting for their lives back there. And so I think whatever, and it's recognizing again that those experiences are natural part of that process. And interesting, when I did my thesis for my clinical training, it was in post-traumatic growth in breast cancer patients.
Wow.
And I got to interview lots of women who had been through it and how they had sort of felt like they gained from the experience, and how they, in terms of, quite small things like, health behaviors, or spending more time with family, or reevaluating certain things, or those sorts of things. So I think I already had that in my mind that, if we get through, then it doesn't have to be something that I have to pretend never happened and forget about, and that that I need to feel traumatized by. I can treat this as just a part of the story that I'm going to deal with and then learn from as well.
I love that's how you embrace fear.
Yeah,
it's so empowering.
Yeah,
it reminded me of this, and it's totally different. But there was this. My business partner and I went to this talk from this woman, amazing woman, who she had a first day of her new job. And she got on the tube, and the next thing, she wakes up in hospital, and she's on the tube that one of the bombs was on, and she lost both of her legs. And she woke up with having both her legs been amputated, and she gave this amazing speech and talk, a keynote speech about it all, and spoke with it. And at the end she said, one of the questions was, do you not feel angry about what happened? She said, no, because that would make me a victim. And actually, I'm embracing it. And I wouldn't be here in front of you right now talking about this.
Yeah.
And that's what I take from it. And it was such a moment of like, oh the world is a really scary place, and things happen and shit happens and we get sick and people die and we fall ill and we get depressed or whatever it is, we lose our jobs. But actually you have to embrace that, and you have to embrace that fear, and you go, no, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and keep going.
Yeah. And the thing is, there is that natural inclination to start down that route of the why me's and stuff like that. But you have to draw a line. You have to stop it at some point, because it doesn't help. It makes things harder. And the last thing you want to do is live in bitterness and resentment. So you have to kind of turn it around and do what you can for yourself, and access kind of gratitude for, there's good and bad in every situation. You can always look for the things you feel grateful for, and you can look for the things that you hate about a situation. Both of them are there to be accessed, but you got to choose what you do with it.
I want everyone to go and buy your book. I really do. We're going to leave a link in the description, because it's truly amazing, and this is going to help so many people.
I hope so.
Especially in 2025, and it's
if not, it will help me. The book I wrote for me.
That has helped me. Julie, we have 8 questions, and I'm sure all of your energy has been zapped, and I'm
I'm
so
good.
sorry.
It's lovely to speak to you.
But we have 8 questions that we'd like to end on. Are you ready?
Yeah.
What's a saying or phrase that you'd want people to come away from this interview with?
Probably the one about the sauna. So, your inner world is like a sauna. So it can have benefits being there, but don't stay for too long. So if you're struggling, reach out to another human being and make connection, because the best thing for your nervous system is somebody else. It's quite a long phrase.
But that's great. I like that a lot. I love that you're like a sauna. It's amazing. Best compliment anyone's ever given you for your work?
Do you know, one of my biggest fears around giving everything away and being public was what other professionals would say and think. You think, oh gosh, they're all going to be, judging me in the background. And so probably the biggest compliments that blow me away of when either people that I've known in the mental health work or medics and stuff, GPs, when they contact me and say, I'm giving out your book, or I'm directing people towards your book, I just think, yes. That's it. It's a real compliment when people who are, have really high standards say that they're recommending it, I think, yeah.
Do you still have that imposter syndrome slightly?
All the time. But I think it's a good sign that you're challenging yourself and you're living, you're aiming up. So, yeah, embrace it.
What scares you most about your work?
From the very beginning that it all changed was that it would come between me and the children, and that it would have an impact on them. I think that was always, and still is, that's always my radar, is what's the balance and how I work from home. So I, still do the school run every day, and I do the, take them all to football and stuff in the afternoon. And then Matt and I get in the office when the kids are in bed and start working again. So there is a price to pay, right? There's a payoff. And so in order to kind of be the mum and still do it, it means, late nights and early mornings and stuff. But I'm willing to do that because I'm under no illusion. This all sounds great and fab and glam and stuff, but I'm under no illusions that the most important work I'll ever do is being a mum.
How tired are you? There we go. Yeah.
A little bit.
When was the last time you cried, and why?
God. Well, I'm a woman, so, occasionally it happens just for no apparent reason. But probably the most significant time was when, as I was coming out the other side of the cancer stuff, it's weird because you imagine there's like this really dramatic moment where you find out and then you just know everything. And then there's a dramatic moment where you're all clear and, ring the bell and stuff. And it wasn't really like that. I went to this appointment to kind of get, results and stuff. And I thought that was going to be like the end point. And so I was almost kind of excited about it. And then what I got was it's not me that decides whether you have, chemo or radio. The oncologist will make a decision, and then you come back in a couple of weeks, and I was just like, oh no, I just really, this disappointment was just huge. This is not the end. This is carrying on, and this is more, and I'm tired of it, and so I remember that kind of drive home was a bit like, oh, I really wanted I wanted the big kind of moment. See you later.
Yeah, bye.
But I didn't have it. So yeah, that was probably the most significant time. But I got it now, so that's right.
What's something you can't let go of?
What can I not let go of? I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I think if someone sort of betrays me or shows that they're not trustworthy, I find that really hard to forget. I feel trust is one of those things where it's like a big bucket of water that you can only fill from a dripping tap. But if someone knocks that over, it takes so long to build it back up again, doesn't it? It's knocked over in an instant, and then, it kind of has to be earned back over time.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm a bit harsh on that side of things. That should be able to just like let things go. But maybe that's a good thing. I'm protecting myself, but
I think
trust
it's a great thing.
Yeah, loyalty
trust
is quite
everything.
important to me. Yeah.
What's your guilty pleasure?
I don't know. Chocolate. Sugar. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
What turns you off?
Probably the thing from before, the sort of dishonesty, or someone when you kind of get to see that someone's not really being themselves, and they're there's a veneer there, and maybe because of the work I do as well, maybe I'm a bit more attuned to that. But yeah, immediately kind of, maybe it's again the trust issue that there's just sort of a bit, yeah.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
What turns you on?
That kind of genuine, someone being totally unapologetically themselves, and not pretending that everything's perfect, or not pretending that they are, you know, anything that they're not.
What do you like most about yourself?
Oh, what a horrible question, Jane.
That's the hardest one in the bunch.
Oh God.
Come on, we can dig deep on this one.
Okay, probably actually the stuff I said about, I feel so strongly about my role as a parent and being present and doing a good job there. I feel like I've got that right. I feel like in a world where I think parenting and family life is being so devalued, or the value of it is not being recognised. And then we're going, well, why is everyone growing up struggling? I feel like I sort of not know something that everyone else doesn't, but I see how important those early years are, and I see how important family life and family connections are. So yeah, probably that.
Bonus, favourite swear word?
I can't say that here.
Is that your answer?
Yeah. Yes,
Dr.
I can't
Julie.
say that.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's your fault.
Sorry. Two ADHD people walk into a bar.
Don't leave till the following Sunday.
You were called Scary Spice. That insinuates that you were mad and unpredictable.
Oh, I think everybody goes mad. I was on stage running,
Stilts.
4 months pregnant, running in them.
Sexy.
Because I was in a very abusive 10-year marriage. When I left that 10-year relationship, I had to really learn how to trust my own instincts. So when you actually walk away, you are absolutely exhausted, but you're so sad. I didn't like what the interview was saying to the girls. I'd go, and I got on the table and stamped on all their pieces of paper.
I got sent to her office because I sent some pictures of the Simpsons having a threesome. I've been.
So you're scary too.
I'm scary. That's why I was like, stop calling her scary. I'm not scary.